And with this project, because it involves blockchain, this is an advantage. I'm talking to you from the nuts and bolts side here, is that investors are interested because it's a hot field right now.
Yeah.
So before, when people wouldn't even look at you because you had a game, now that you say blockchain game, everyone wants to check you out.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carla Duke, and today I'm joined by John Wolff. John is the founder and lead producer at Urban Electronic Games, a studio focusing on AR experiences and exploring blockchain technology. He also works for multiple studios in Japan as an international consultant, among other responsibilities. Today, we'll be talking about his background working in the Japan games industry, understanding the trend we're seeing with decentralized apps, and the power and opportunity we have with this next frontier of game development. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 5 of season 4 of the Zero to Play podcast. All right, welcome, John, to the show. Thanks for joining me.
I like it. It got me jazzed. I'm ready for this.
Me too. So I'm really interested about this conversation because we're going to be talking about the Japan games industry. We're going to be talking about dApps and blockchain technology. I think you have some fascinating kind of topics and things that you're working on. So yeah, we're going to jump around a bit, but where I'd like to start, I think, is just, I guess, understanding. It seems like the wave a few years ago, there was a wave with like Bitcoin. Once that was kind of, it became this new kind of form of digital currency. There was another wave that happened at the beginning of this year when Ethereum and like smart contracts started disrupting what could be done. But I feel like you kind of entered the game a few years ago during that last wave. And I'd love to just know what it was like when you kind of stepped into this kind of blockchain world and what the kind of environment looked like at that stage. Like what was the thing that kind of got you involved?
Yeah, so you're kind of saying that you feel that this second wave has happened this year in terms of Ethereum and smart contracts. So you're talking about 2020 when you're saying, I'm sorry, 2021 when you're talking about this. I first started making blockchain games on the Ethereum network in 2018. So
that's insane.
Yeah. So that's when I was introduced to it. And the reason why is because I am a game developer, game developer first. I love the game industry, was exploring it, moved to Japan, worked for a company, and really it was happenstance. The company that I worked for all of a sudden was like, yo, we're going to start making games that have blockchain. And I was like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. I barely know what Bitcoin is. I definitely don't know what Ethereum is. And so then I had to feverishly learn the entire ins and outs of what blockchain is and how it could be applied because we were going to do it in this project. So back then, and again, in 2018, there weren't really any projects out there. The games, I would actually say, were a lot more they were experimental, but they were also more wholesome. And like, they were like, okay, let's actually try to make a game and try to put blockchain in it. I feel like a lot of projects that are coming out now are a lot more try to like get rich quick schemes and people trying to leverage smart contracts to, find a way to monetize games. But back then when it was really not understood, we were just really experimentation. So I think that might have began to answer the question, but I started doing it in 2018, got into it, kind of out of nowhere, and was really trying to understand myself of like, okay, how can we actually make a quality game with this technology, and finding out that it did give ownership and it gave these new ways for monetization intrigued me a lot, because I think that game developers really need to understand their monetization models.
Yeah, so what I find really fascinating about the space is I feel like there's almost two, like the blockchain portion of the games industry, I feel like is becoming its own sector, and it doesn't really kind of merge with the traditional games industry yet.
Correct.
As it worked, like as it is, and I guess my question is, when you kind of joined this company in 2018 and blockchain games was kind of the hot topic, were these people, traditional game developers that kind of moved over, or did they come from more like an e-commerce background and they wanted to use games as a medium? Like, what was that balance like?
Right. So that's exactly what as an inherent game developer, I can't help but have a little bit of or rather be able to see that distinction clearly,
Mm,
because the games that are being made right now, I would say, are blockchain economists or
mm,
people who do blockchain technology adding gamification, and we all know
mm,
gamification is just adding bells and whistles onto something, adding leveling up system.
mm,
But there is the other side of the coin, which are, all right, we are game developers and we are trying to add on a new technology, which in this case is for a monetization strategy, if we just want to look at just what it can do for your game.
mm,
So the company I worked for was called Good Luck 3, and we still have really good relations. I still partner with them in this project I'm making, this augmented reality game. But they were making just video games before, like, out of nowhere, just
mm.
regular things. That we had the IP to Sanrio. So if you know Gudetama, I don't know if you've heard of that game, but maybe you know Hello Kitty,
Yep,
right? So Hello
absolutely.
Kitty. Exactly. It's another character inside of that IP within the Sanrio IP. So we're making video games that were using really cute kawaii elements of, and that was really fun to learn about the Japanese way of how games are made. But we were making regular games, mobile games. We made another game called Aerial Legends, which had over 2 million downloads, which was a JRPG. So you ended up having like millions of characters with all these different abilities, and you'd be able to do gotcha and get another one every day. Like, so nothing that was watching at all.
Mm,
And then honestly, like, we all came into a meeting one day and they were like, yeah, Bitcoin is hot, blockchain is hot, so we're going to integrate into games. And they're like, honestly, we're just like, what? Like, dude, like, what are you talking about? But
mhm.
I have to give him credit, like, for being a visionary, was able to see where this was going. And then we just kind of took our, original game elements that we have, how to make a game, and then added blockchain onto it. And there were benefits for that, but there were also a lot of drawbacks. Which I can talk about. But again, we were originally, game developers. And even still, when I talk to game developers, like, I understand where you're coming from. I am a game developer first and a blockchain, I don't know, economist second. And trying to merge those two has really been a very exciting challenge, but definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I feel like the main challenge for a game studio to enter into the space is being like having to answer to the platforms that they're distributed on. So things like the
Sure.
the App Store or Steam, or the Epic Game Store. I feel like those models or those platforms don't really support that kind of shift yet. And I guess my question is how was that conversation? How did that conversation happen? And how were the games kind of distributed back then to make it seem like a viable option? Because like to get to your customer base, did they find a way, like maybe, yeah, did they find a way to kind of access these platforms with the blockchain technology, or was it kind of a completely separate route?
So what's so cool about this blockchain industry, right? Is that it's a blockchain game industry, is that it's so new, but it imitates a lot of what used to happen. So for example, when mobile games first came out, Angry Birds, right?
Mm,
Breakout title. Probably there's the one that we're thinking like, oh my God, or Fruit Ninja, right?
mm,
Maybe a Hatbrick and then Rovio and even Clash of Clans, that's later. But
mm,
like when we first had those mobile games that came out, can we say like maybe around 2009, 2010 is
mm,
when that first happened. And even that's not a long time ago. It's a decade ago now. It was like any person who had a mobile game was able to get their game featured in the App Store, or they were able to get their review for their game written about, because people were out there, like yourself. Maybe this
mm,
was 10 years ago. We'd be having this conversation. You'd be like, you'd say the same thing. You'd be like, well, we got these platformers, but like, how do you do this thing called mobile games? It's on your phone.
mm,
It's the same. We're going through a cycle. And
mm,
during that time, it was so easy to get publications and marketing and
mm,
free exposure to your game, where people will be able to find it for those enthusiasts who
mm,
were interested in mobile games. So now, again, 10 years later, you're seeing this happen again, where it's like there are enthusiasts and there are people who want to talk about your game, because if you are an article writer, you want people to look at your content. What are you going to talk about? So talk about something that's new. That
mm,
helps me as a game developer get my game out there. So when we were creating this game, which was called Cryptoink, and we released it, it was this early stage. And even now it's still like this, but even then it was so early. It was like, hey, like, this is cool. This is a blockchain game. I'm going to write about it. I want to talk about it. And the enthusiasts were like, I want to be able to find a way to play this game and then, oh, make money from trading NFTs. Like, what? I barely understand that, but I like the game. And it's only been more and more since then. I mean, you're coming at this now when it's still the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But then it was even more people just being like, let me feature your game for free. Let me give you to these people that I know. And it was very easy to do a go-to-market strategy because it was so new and novel. And that's very important, I think, to understand in terms of penetration, market penetration.
Totally. Yeah. I remember things, especially back, a few years ago when kind of Bitcoin was taking off. Like, just as a technologist, I was vaguely interested, but I'm not a software developer or anything like that. So I didn't go like too deep into it. I didn't become a Bitcoin miner and things like that. But I feel like now, and especially in the last few months, I've definitely seen the kind of games journalists that I really respect start to talk about these blockchain games, things like Zed Run and Axie Infinity. Yeah, like those are the ones that kind of get talked about the most. And so I do feel like there's this kind of shift happening where it's probably still early stage, but it's like it's not very early now. It's early in that kind of bell curve where things are going to start to be like mainstream, and the people that are going to succeed are going to start showing up soon, which is why like I want to start talking about it on the podcast as well, because I do feel like there's value in understanding kind of the shift that's happening. Do you mind talking a bit about Tontachi AR? Because I feel in the bio on Twitter, it says it's the kind of the sequel to Cryptoink. Could you kind of explain, one, like that's in the AR space as well, which is another very kind of like niche industry, but do you mind just explaining the kind of mission of Tontachi and what you hope that becomes?
Yeah. I know, and it's and there's so much, right? It's so hard to be able to talk about all this in a coherent manner. So I'm going to do my best so that your viewers, when looking at this, are like, man, they're going a lot of places. But so we were working on the CryptoInk project in 2018, and we released it. It did well for its early time. I was living in Japan at the time. I was working with them. It was a really cool space to be in. It allowed me to travel the world and to really go around to find out more about blockchain games in general. And there were some pain points that we hit in terms of being able to adapt to this blockchain game market, because we were, as I mentioned, traditionally a video game company. And I think that it was very hard for us to keep up. I had some specific ideas that the company didn't necessarily agree with. And so it was my interest then, was like, okay, well, I really feel like this is something that we should try to push when we're doing blockchain games. So as I came back to the United States, I wanted to know if I could still utilize the characters, the 3D assets, to make this spin-off project. And my relations with the company were very good. Again, these conversations were all in Japanese. And they were like, yeah, okay, like we'll let it happen. And so I began to create an augmented reality companion app to it. Cool. So Tontachi is a pet simulator in which you have these really cute pigs, the same pigs that you can use in CryptoInk. So CryptoInk is in of itself a pet racing game where you breed pigs together, where you have like a red one and a blue one, and you can get a purple one. But there are 36 quadrillion types that are possible. So there's so many permutations and different iterations that you can have. Some of my favorites are ones that have afros, like that has like a jetpack on its back, or you have like ones with like nose rings, and you have like ones with like fleur-de-lises. I mean, like the list goes on for you to find the one that you find that's so cute, and you'll breed them together to find that. Now, what I've done is create something that's called, well, really utility. It's just a normal word, but it's also called interoperability, meaning that these game characters are on the blockchain. They are NFTs. They're ERC 721 tokens. Now, I have developed a proprietary technology that allows me to take a 3D NFT and bring it into my native game, into my mobile app. So now I can bring those cute characters that you have into a mobile application and then play with them in augmented reality. So I'm taking something that has been born into the digital space, onto the Ethereum blockchain, and bringing it into reality through an augmented lens. So that's what this project is supposed to be about, is how can we explore blockchain technology in new ways, in more intrinsic ways, but still actually create something that has extrinsic value, because the whole point of creating a blockchain title game is that you can then take something out of the digital realm and actually make money off of it.
Mhm.
So while we are quintessentially trying to make a quality product, this quality product actually has things that you can do within it, so you can still extract real value. So you're playing with augmented reality, you discover something that's rare. You're over in New Zealand and you find an item that I won't be able to find over here in the United States, over in Michigan. So I see you put up on the marketplace. I'm like, yo, I want that item, and I'll buy it from you because you've only been able to find it from taking your pet pig outside into the real world over in somewhere in New Zealand. And that's how you create something called a game economy. And blockchain allows for games to have game economies, and that's what we're all trying to really master in this space.
Yeah,
and that's the point of this project.
I feel like this is kind of going towards a conversation of the metaverse, which is starting to become a bit like more and more frequently brought up in this podcast.
I know. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that word showing up everywhere now? I'm curious.
It depends who I'm talking to. I think some people I talk to have put a lot of thought into it, but yeah, the definition changes depending on the person. But one kind of part of that word that I want to just explore a bit deeper based off what you just said is the idea of pulling your identity from one experience into a different one. Is that so that's kind of what I understood you're kind of talking about, and it just kind of made me start thinking about this future where I could get a CryptoPunk and then put that CryptoPunk into different game experiences. Is that kind of thread of thought something that you've thought about a lot? Not necessarily the IP being completely owned within one brand, so the CryptoPunk ecosystem, but something that's like wider than that, and that any kind of IP can be brought into different experiences. Have you thought about that at all?
Yes, and we have examples of it. So, and that used to be something that was a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? That was more for the love of the game. So that's interoperability. We're still talking about interoperability here. And in 2018, when we were still all new, we all were doing collaborations with each other. I feel like now that it's been more of this is more of a business, we're getting away from actually that beauty of interoperability. Now, there's still projects like Decentraland, which allow people to bring in, other aspects that they have. So there is that kind of nice, I guess, metaverse thing going on. But, you look at Sandbox, if you heard of a project called Sandbox, they have the same thing, but their interoperability comes in the form of IPs, right? Like Atari is now inside the Sandbox, and I don't know, there are other brand names that are inside of it. But yes, inherently, the beauty of the technology is so that you're able to bring one game character into another. People have written about talking about, oh, just imagine Smash Bros. Where my characters are against yours, and it's all in this game. We actually, over at Good Luck 3, actually made this game. You can look it up, and it's called what was it called? It's called Bomber. Oh my gosh, the
Bomber
name's
Squad
right
or something.
No, it was called Bomb Stars. There we go. And if you look at it, it's like we stopped the project because, again, remember, we're game developers, but we didn't find we weren't able to find the monetization aspects of it. So we're like, okay, we didn't do well, but we did all of these experiments. So with inside of Bomb Stars, you can bring in your Crypto Kitty, you can bring in your Axie Infinity as your avatar, and you can bring in all of your NFTs. And then everyone's going against each other in this, I think 16 on 16, like battle royale of individuals just playing this game, but their avatars were their actual NFTs. So this is out there, like it's in the App Store. You can download, like we've done this, but it is those projects that are the future, and that we've already done them. But you can also do like a lot of cool stuff with it. And I think that is the beautiful element of blockchain technology. You'll see, we'll probably end up getting back to it once we get more of the legal stuff out the way.
Totally. Yeah. Like one trend I'm seeing is, people, when they have a CryptoPunk, they put it as their Twitter profile picture, or if they have like a lazy line to kind of show they're part of that community. Yeah. And then now there's the kind of trend, punkscapes, which is someone creating a background for your CryptoPunks that you can kind of make it look nice on like as a Twitter banner. And I feel like it's kind of going deeper and deeper into this whole online identity, how you want to promote yourself online to your community. And and that's, I think, in the same realm of conversation as you don't want to bring your face into this game as your avatar. You want to bring something that kind of has value behind it, that proves that you're part of a community, or or that kind of thing. And I do think that's very strong. And betting on anything to do with community is I think a safe bet, because people are putting a lot of money
Very true.
behind just the idea of community, and I think humans are very much tied to that.
Very true. But keep in mind though, I think you're absolutely correct. But keep in mind though, you're not talking about interactivity. So we're actually not talking about a game yet. I mean,
Yeah,
well, I was talking about a game, but if you're saying that people
yeah,
have them as your avatar, okay. And that is one thing that again, as a game developer, is really is a hard pill to swallow, because CryptoPunks, Bored Ape Yacht Club, they are still 2D, two-dimensional
mm,
images. Everyone understands NFTs right now as art,
mm,
but again, we started in doing this as games. Like
mm,
my understanding is understanding how you can actually do things with them.
mm,
But everyone right now thinks like, okay, like I have this image and I can put it as my avatar.
mm,
Well, we're still not to the point. We're still not discussing the point where, what are the attributes that are within inside of this NFT, that what's its level, what are its
mm,
characteristics. And that's when we start talking about blockchain games
mm,
like Axie Infinity, like CryptoInk, like Tontachi. So there is a rise of individuals doing more things, gamification
mm,
with static NFTs. But
mm.
are those, do we qualify those as games?
Yeah,
We should we? I don't know. That's where that's a debate that
yeah,
will continuously occur.
definitely. Just quickly, have you heard of the project called Loot, and what they're doing?
I have not.
So they kind of they sell NFTs that have all these. It's just it's a black background with white text, and it has all these kind of characteristics. Or every NFT
Hmm.
is like 7 items, and then it's just completely
Hmm.
kind of randomly generated. But you pretty much you
Hmm.
get that NFT, and then it's not art. It's stats. It's like it's just stats, and then it's
Yep.
however you interpret those stats. You can convert it into art afterwards if you want. But yeah, it's just another way that people are expressing themselves through NFTs, but I think you're right. Like there's no kind of game design element with a lot of the innovation that's happening. And I think that will be, yeah, I just think the word NFT is gonna be impactful, like disrupt so many different areas of like
Mm.
not just games, not just art, not just real estate, whatever it might be, to have like a proof of contract. So yeah,
Right. Right.
it's definitely a big word that covers a lot. So I think
Yeah.
tying a bow on that kind of conversation, I think we spoke about some valuable things. One area I want to get your thoughts on is the just augmented reality as a medium. What
Mm.
are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that it's here to stay? How far do you think augmented reality can go, based on what you're kind of investing your time in?
Good question. Again, I feel safe exploring it within games because games are always going to be around.
Mhm.
There are not a lot of popular augmented reality games that are out there. Still Pokemon Go, which we actually have the light partnership with because we're using Lightship in our game.
That's awesome.
But there aren't a lot of breakout titles because it's been hard for games to standardize the technology. Game developers standardize the technology. How can I make a actually immersive development or AR game when it's just hard to, when the tools aren't there? And
Mm,
Niantic has been able to, they're going to probably change the game on that. And then you deal with the traditional issues of I made this game. Now, how do I monetize it? How do I make it popular? How do I get it in
mm,
your face? Because there's millions of mobile apps that come out, and how
mhm,
do you get through the plethora? But the technology itself, I do think it is here to stay, and it's going to become standardized more. I think people really like spectacles. Like, people are liking the fact that they're AR glasses that are coming out.
mhm,
I still think we're a ways off from that because people are still very tied to their phones.
mhm.
We're going to be dependent upon our phones for at least another, decade.
Which is a long time in
Maybe
tech.
two. Yeah, yeah, right.
Mm,
So, well, then again, but things do change rapidly. But I think, yeah, we're not going to automatically find ourselves one. I mean, one day we will, but not, I'd
mm,
still say we got at least 5 years
mm,
until people are really like, check me out on my spectacles and my glasses, and I can now put things in augmented reality while I'm looking around. Like,
mm,
that is definitely the future, but it's
mm,
still going to take us a minute to get there. Even though, like, you see developers doing the people having it, but I was talking with somebody about this, the usability about it the other day, of like, well, someone was like, I have glasses. How do you expect me to have my glasses and have spectacles as well? And I was like, wow, I don't have glasses, and I never thought of that. Like, so sure, you can get or you can get lenses for them, and you can get them prescription, but that's a hurdle. It's a technological hurdle. It's definitely here to stay. VR is here to stay. Games are going to propel them to be more and more commonplace until we have other applications. Other applications of AR is great for, historical reference of just, imagine you have an app and it's like you hold it up and like this is what the world was like. So it would be great for museums to be able to adopt it, or just, from a historical standpoint of being able to see what used to be here. I think is a beautiful thing that I think AR can do so easily, which I would love to see more of, or just to really see that happen. Obviously the medical field is able to utilize it. I know that a lot of engineering, like manufacturing engineering, utilizes AR in terms of just education about how the system works. So the applications are out there. They're just not as glorified as we're really seeing them. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe what it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of the headlines talk about like, what's the next $1 billion portion of the games industry, like where the next like big project's going to come from, but I think that's kind of it kind of does a disservice to the potential of these different mediums and like AR and like you're saying, all the different solutions that like the use cases that you just mentioned, those are really valuable and worthy of kind of discussion. And it's not only about making money or making like a huge blockbuster hit and getting everyone over to the platform. It's like it's going to impact the industry in so many different areas. There's no one use case for that thing, and I think that's what a lot of people, including myself, kind of are looking for. But there's a lot of people doing some really, really good work that doesn't necessarily need to translate into millions of people playing it. It could just solve a really hard problem that does really well.
I mean, if you want some metrics, 2020 Pokemon Go made 1.3 billion. Axie Infinity, has crossed the $1 billion in transactions. So if you're looking for signals of what could create something, but also when you're the first to do something well, you're going to be able to attract the masses. I mean, yes, Pokemon Go is great, but you're also being able to leverage Pokemon, which was a breakout IP. So, you do it right and you're going to be able to capitalize and get all of those, get that audience. So, what's the next, unique idea? I mean, how do you find that, who's making it? Hopefully Tontachi ends up being, like really that really cool blend of AR and blockchain that will make millions. I mean, that's what I'm projecting when I got to do, pitch decks and stuff. But yeah, where games are going to go, yes, it's going to be a mixture of utilizing these technologies. But for me, it's like, as long as you can make monetization happen with these, then keep on, making something beautiful.
Totally. I think it might be a Tontachi as well. Is there a release date for that? I believe it's in early access right now, or it's what's the state of the game?
Yeah, I mean, MVP, like as soon as we get done with this, I'm going back to work. But pre-alpha is supposed to be released in November. Cool. So next month. And it's because I'm going to be speaking over at NFT NYC, which is this big conference in New York that talks about, the NFTs. And I was hoping to really have everything buttoned up then. Excuse me. We'll be releasing, specific items that you'll be able to bring into the game, the whole importation flow. So November is when that's happening. But that's still pre-alpha. The cool thing about blockchain, I think, is that it allows you, because again, it's like this new realm or blockchain games is this new realm of games. We're allowed to dish out things that are rough and not have them, and still be able to monetize them, but also still be able to release them in unfinished stages. Like even Zed Run and Axie Infinity are like, Sandbox like just announced like, oh hey everyone, we're in alpha. I'm like, alpha? Your projects have been around for forever. We're only still saying alpha right now. I'm like, okay, like I love this. Let's go. All right, so I'm going to be releasing pre-alpha, but when does alpha come? Who knows? But but yeah, intending to have it ready by November for people to be able to play on a massive scale. And it's supposed to be, catered towards those who don't do blockchain, who just like games. And then those who are blockchain enthusiasts is supposed to be, really give everyone an experience.
Cool. How big's the team? Because I feel like it's just you, and I feel like you do a lot of the work with the kind of blogs that you release. How big is the team?
Yeah, man, you can use all the help I get. You want to help me out, please.
Is it just you that's
No,
running the show?
it's me and one other individual, and then we have a contract artist.
Wow.
Yeah, we're not a big studio. We're indies, independent game developers have to do more with less. Yeah, I mean, another hard part about being in industry, where do you get your funding from? Traditionally, game companies are not funded. They're not looked favorably upon by investors. And again, I've been in the game industry for a while now. Like back when there was no blockchain, I was just pitching the game ideas that I had. Investors and people would be like, no, I'm not going to give you any money. And it was like, man, like, how am I going to fund these projects? And it's a chicken and the egg. Like you need the game to make the money, but you need the money to make the game, which is a classic thing that probably so many people who are listening to this are going to resonate with. And with this project, because it involves blockchain, this is an advantage. I'm talking to you from the nuts and bolts side here, is that investors are interested. Wow. Because it's a hot field right now.
Yeah.
So before, when people wouldn't even look at you because you had a game, now that you say blockchain game, everyone wants to check you out. And I think that's a huge advantage for game developers. And they should leverage, because people will listen to you now if you utilize the right buzzwords, let alone, I mean, you should be able to know how to integrate the technology. So don't get me wrong. I know what I'm talking about because I've been around the block. But the fact that my team is small and I am on the cusp of being able to have a raise or get funding because of the integration of blockchain is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
It is fascinating that now it is within the realm of conversation and people are looking upon it favorably. So it's a small team right now, but we could have this conversation in 2 weeks from now, and I will be able to be in a position of expanding my team greatly, which I'm hoping to do.
I'm really happy to hear that, and it's awesome. I can feel the passion behind your voice, and that is a really interesting observation that I hope. It just speaks to what how the market is right now, which I think if you're an indie developer, you need to be aware of where the market is looking.
Right.
And I think that's just like one of the conversations. If you want to pursue your passion and you're kind of dead set on your idea, there's always that balance of trying to get funding and convince other people that it's a good idea as well. And it's that constant battle. But that's a really cool observation that I haven't heard before. That makes a lot of sense. And there's a whole different industry of people now looking at funding blockchain games that probably wouldn't fund traditional games.
Nope.
They're just very different. They're coming from different angles. So
right.
Yeah, that is really interesting to hear, and I'm interested to know how it manifests over the next few weeks, few months, few years, and like what projects kind of come out on top. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Just I mean, one point is like, and this was that, so AAA studios are, they're how much can I say about it? I mean, this is it's funny because this is really what it is. AAA studios want to, what do you say, tip your toe into the space, into the water. They want to dip your toe into the water. And they do that by investing in smaller companies that are doing it, right? Like, I don't think people really know, but this is common knowledge, that Ubisoft was an early investor in Axie Infinity. Wow. So like, this is just like, so people are wondering, oh, well, AAA titles don't want to do this. Well, they just don't want to because they can't, because they're so tied to their IPs. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they're not going to deviate, so they're going to instead, understand how it works by investing in other companies. So that's one aspect of how bigger companies are starting to flock into the space. Again, the partnership with Atari and Sandbox, right? Atari has given Sandbox, I don't know how much money, or has just bought land within Sandbox. So now they can do whatever they want. That's how you get involved. And this goes back to, the old days of one of the problems that Nintendo had for the longest time is they never entered mobile.
Mm.
It was like they released their Super Mario game, like still within the last like 2-3 years. Like it's
Yeah.
still not, we've been in the mobile started like a decade ago.
Yeah.
But it's this hesitancy that these AAA studios have in these new markets.
Mm.
And it's only over time where I'm sorry, it's not only over time. It's through investment in smaller companies that they are trying to understand, which benefits us indies if we integrate that into our business models, which I think is very important. So that's what I wanted to add on to there.
It's a really, really good point. And it's fascinating the fact that Nintendo didn't enter mobile until so late, yet they have they completely blew everyone away with Niantic and Pokemon Go, which is, yeah, like that's just kind of fascinating how they were so late in one area yet so early in another. It's funny how that.
Well, personally, I think it has to do with Japanese cultural values, which is a whole nother conversation I can get into. But I could see why. But also, yeah, like totally kind of missed the boat on that one. Was like, what's taking you so long? Why? But instead, hey, what they do, you invest in a smaller company, let them run with it, and then see how it goes. That's kind of like the strategy that I'm seeing bigger companies do.
Cool. So yeah, speaking of Japanese cultural values, I think that this is another interesting area that I want to just kind of get some insight into you from. So what I guess what was your entry into game dev, and then what was your reason to move to Japan? I feel like those are two really important questions that I'd love to know. Like, what was your first first job in the industry, and then what led you to moving to Japan?
My first job, I mean, I was always an independent game developer since I was in like high school. My first job was mobile advertising, just because it was a well-paying job out of college. But we were giving ads all the time to video games. And again, it would hurt so much because I learned more about the monetization of games more than I wanted to, which is really good though. Because then again, in the time when we were doing mobile ads, when we're doing mobile games, it was like, what's your monetization strategy? Okay, you're going to do ads. And the same conversation happened where game developers would be like, oh, I don't want to integrate blockchain technology. Then it was like, I don't want to integrate ad technology. I think it's cheapening the experience. I don't like it. But simultaneously, there were games that weren't good. There are blockchain games that aren't great, that are making a lot of money because they're just adopting the technology. And every day I'd be working in this mobile ad company being like, oh my God, this game just made so much money off of these ads. And I'd be like, but this game is just not.
Totally.
But I've always had an interest in Japanese culture. To me, video games originated over in Japan. We're thinking about Mario, we're thinking about Sonic. So it just made the most sense for me as a student of the industry to study it over from where games came from.
Wow.
So it just made sense to me that if I really wanted to be in this industry and if I really wanted to understand it, then that would be that. And I think anyone should know another language. And so it just made sense pragmatically from a business standpoint that Japanese would be that one. Easier said than done. But I started doing it a little bit in college, but then I decided to leave the job that I had in the mobile industry, and pack up and move to Japan. I had a plan. I mean, I enrolled into this university, Kansai University, which was an intensive language program. So it was Japanese every day from like 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. every single day, quizzes every day, tests every other week, sakubuns, which are essays, which were every other week, and that they would mark us down. I don't know how familiar you are with the different alphabets there are in Japanese, but there's
wow.
The characters that look like they're Chinese characters because they deviate from Chinese characters. They're called kanji, and we would write essays, and basically they would mark us down if we didn't use, like, if I wrote the word food in one alphabet and not the one where I'm supposed to use the character, they'd mark you down for that. So it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that sounds
ridiculous.
Insane.
It was the toughest thing I ever put myself through. But the reason why
that's awesome.
Thank you. I can't tell you how much of a lonely journey it was actually. Because there wasn't anyone really over here in this university who was. I think there was only like 3 of us who were Westerners, maybe 4. Wow. Everyone else was pretty much Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese. So there weren't a lot of people to talk to, and I wasn't able to talk
Mhm.
to my friends about like, I mean, we were able to talk, but it was different. Wasn't able to see my family. But it
Mhm.
was pragmatic. I wanted to go to Japan. The first video game I ever really liked was Final Fantasy VIII, followed by Metal Gear Solid 3. So I thought I always enjoyed this element of this role playing aspect, this sense of teamwork. I really enjoyed within video games, and let alone the fact that video games are really playable movies to me.
Mhm.
And to me, I just saw Japanese titles really capturing that, and that's why
Mhm.
I was so taken not only to games, but then also specifically to Japanese games, and therefore, as I wanted to explore the industry and the business, it made sense for me to go to Japan.
Wow, that's incredible. I love that your passion for games led to you moving country and learning a brand new language. I absolutely love that. If you could distill all the research you've done in the like Japanese games industry and how like Mario and Sonic came to be, and like
Mm.
if you were to distill that into some principles for like good game design, what would you say as like, if you were to build like a studio or try and replicate the kind of games that you loved dearly growing up, what would you say those like principles are?
To do it based upon the games that I liked and define something that's usable there is kind of tough. I mean, like Metal Gear, I mean, that's just the man's just, well, here, I mean, here's the common trend, right? It's people focusing on evolution as much, not as much as copying, but being able to have, faith and confidence in that you are that and what you're doing is the forthcoming thing, as opposed to just copying but
Mhm.
originating. So Hideo Kojima from Metal Gear, I mean, the dude just understood what the future was going to be like. I mean, if you play Metal Gear Solid 2 now, like everything he's talking about disinformation is everything you hear about for on I mean, you're over in New Zealand.
Mhm.
The news that you hear in America is always like disinformation, things that are wrong, what is truth, too much information that's coming on online. What
Mhm.
we're not able to siphon things that are coming in from Twitter and from Facebook and whatever. It was like I was like, yo, this was talked about in Metal Gear in 2000 in
Yeah.
2000 whatever. So it's like it's so cool. So just a guy who's a visionary.
Mhm.
Um, I think I remember reading about I think it was Kutagati, the individual who made the PlayStation. I'm messing up his name, and he had an amazing quote that was like, like the story in the Star in the North Wind. Like when you're focusing on evolution, you can't try to force people to understand what you're making. You just have to like gradually show them the other side of the mountain, or like the future, just by and by.
Mhm.
So you can't force something down someone's throat. You have to be able to show them through a cool product, but you also just have to believe that what you're focusing on is evolution. So all of these games, that have become the zeitgeist
Mhm.
of game development, all were novel. So I mean, that's the only trend that I'm seeing,
Mhm.
of how one thing becomes a useful tactic for people to do. I
Mhm.
mean, if you think you have a novel game, you know, believe in it, believe in yourself, and then just try to have people play it and really go from there. So that's more of like a of an esoteric or quintessential feeling of it. Another cool one was I've been reading the book about Nintendo, about like how Nintendo took over America, I think is like what it's called. And I love this because the individual who made the Game Boy made it off of off the shelves pieces from the old from the original what is it, the original Nintendo,
The
Super Nintendo, like
Super
yeah,
Nintendo. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
The
yeah. And
NES.
like,
The
so
NES.
yes, from the NES, right? And and he even called it this specific like phrase in Japanese, but like it translates also to like of making something new off of like off the shelf parts or something.
Mhm.
So it's like just maybe remixing something that's old, but it's also I'm not doing it justice. I'm not doing justice right now. I need to write this out myself. But
No,
it
no,
was so
no.
cool when I was reading in this book, and I was like, yo, that's exactly how I feel as I broke off from this other company. But was like, you guys have a product that can be remixed and can be done in a new light. So allow
Mhm.
me to do that, because again, like I said, we're doing 3D NFTs, we're doing augmented reality. but we have the capacity to do that. And I'm just, asking them, let me grab that asset, let me grab this asset, let me take this piece, let me take this piece, and reworking it. And it was really cool to see that reflected in this book about the individual who created the Game Boy. Was like, yeah, like, I just took the pieces from the NES and just kind of made it work in a smaller form, and then we just kind of shipped it out and it worked. So I don't know if that answered your question that well, but there's a lot of great to be a history of the game industry. I think benefits to know what future trends are.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really good point. Tapping into culture, like you're saying, like having that gut feeling as to where you think the future's heading, or like the issues that you deeply care about now. If they are like shared by enough people, then that will be like a trend and infuse itself into culture. And if you can tap into that by creating a game that's because Kojima was probably really passionate about that when he created Metal Gear Solid 2, and yeah, it was probably really early in his time, like in its time, but it's awesome to see how that story carries on, and it has only like grown and become bigger.
Yeah, I mean, well, when he first made Metal Gear, it was for, like what, Game Boy or whatever. It was even on the PlayStation. He went through so many iterations that weren't famous, but he loved that idea of, espionage and whatever. And he kept on building on new platforms. Whenever a new game came out, he kept on trying on that with his original idea. So his idea was solid. He already had his game design, but it was just like, adapting new technologies, which is what we're talking about. And finally, not only did his amazing idea catch on, but it matched the current technological stack that made it a breakout title. So it's just, people just adapting new technologies with the ideas that they feel are worth spreading.
Totally. Yeah. One question I love to ask guests on the show is why do you love games as a medium? Like why have you stuck in this industry so long? Why didn't you move to film, or why didn't you I don't know, why didn't you study like Japanese and become a translator after, like how have you stayed in games for so long? Why do you love this medium so much?
Yeah, good question. But it's because it's allowed me to do those things, actually. So video games have allowed me to travel the world. I mean, because of games, I became interested in Japanese. I'm pretty much a linguist, which I didn't even expect, would even think to be in my life. Like, I can break down the language so well now, that I've been able to utilize it to help people out with overseas marketing. Okay, that's great. To do interpretation, to do translation, to read mangas and learn new things about culture that I didn't even know about. Samurai culture, I could talk for hours about how ridiculous the discipline of a samurai is and how to apply that to your own life. Like, wow. But all these cool things came from games. So I've been staying in the industry because it's been like a haven for me to, it's been a space for me to explore other places. And as a business, as an entrepreneur within the game segment, yes, it has been very challenging from a monetization standpoint, but the rewards that I've gotten outside of that have been beautiful. I've gone to Finland, which people don't know is big for video games, specifically mobile. Rovio, Clash of Clans. Those are games that are coming from Finland. Again, I went there because my video game journey took me there. My company was like, hey, we got to go to this conference. You can speak English, so go. And I was like, wow.
Awesome.
So yeah, Korea, Singapore, all because of video games. So I've been in this industry because it's become international business for me. That is an added benefit. More holistically, I've always been about the value that video games have in being able to transform someone's life, because they're abstract in nature, but being able to pull those values from the realm of the abstract and apply them to your life, I think is so fascinating. I mean, the same thing can be done for movies or whatever, for any medium, but the fact that the agency you have and you're the vehicle breathing life into this experience, but when that begins to give you something in return, that juxtaposition is that breaking that fourth wall, I think is so fascinating. I have a TED talk about this that it's floating around there. Just search TEDx.
I'll check it out.
BU, TED John Wolff or something like that. It'll show up. But that was a younger me talking about it, and I was making a game about a bank robbery. And the whole deal of the bank robbery was like, if this was a bank robbery scenario, would you decide to be a hero and a villain or a survivor? And we were basically making a Myers-Briggs 2.0 test for you, So who are you when you're in an alternative realm. And now that we've identified that, we're just going to question you to be like, maybe you actually can be more heroic. Maybe you actually can be more conniving. But it's that beauty that I think video games have, that make people aware of themselves or unaware of themselves.
And there's no other medium that compares to what games can do. You can't compare that to another medium where you're watching someone do the actions. You're actually kind of living in that space. Off the podcast, you mentioned how when you living in Japan, you realized how games weren't this kind of side part of kind of culture and society, that in Japan it's kind of integrated, and you realized how much games are a part of everyday life. I'd love for you to just expand on that for a few minutes as to what do games look like, and what do they mean in Japan? What did you mean with that point?
So there's some, it's both a good and bad story, but the good of it is, so each city will have avatars, right? They'll actually have a mascot that represents their city, or or so there's that media is so much more integrated into every aspect of business. So there's something called a yurukera, which means a mascot. And anything and everything, any service you have seems like it's gamified in some way. When you order food, it's not from a person at the window, there's a kiosk and you order the food there. And it's not just a regular kiosk. It's going to have some game character or some character being like, oh, you want to order this? Okay, great. You just won these points, and flashing lights and just a lot of, things that are supposed to trigger the rat brain and things to make you excited. Those permeate society everywhere you're going to go. KPIs are some of the highest metrics in terms of average revenue per daily active user, conversion rates. Those are all still really high over in Japan. So that shows that that the country takes to video games. So I'd be on the train. People would be playing games on their phone. I would even be next to a person who's still playing. I think he was playing. This was an older man, definitely in his 40s or 50s, playing. I think it was Final Fantasy on his flip phone. That dude's had that phone for a while. It's hilarious. So it's and he was right next to a child playing a game on their phone or on a Vita or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's just everyone is well integrated. There's no stigma you shouldn't be playing games. It's no, you should be. Game centers are open 24/7. So we don't have game arcades that you can really find anywhere. I'm actually curious to know if they're over in New Zealand. Are there?
There's a couple internet cafes where you can do overnighters at. It's usually people playing Counter-Strike or Diablo.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are moving to their own PC setups here, that seems to be the trend.
Interesting.
There are a few, but not probably as many as Japan. No way.
So that makes sense. That's funny you say that, because I think over in Finland, I actually saw a few. I haven't really seen too many in America, but yeah, over in Japan, it's it's a whole. They have game towns. I think game blocks. Sega has their own block of all their games. Konami has its own block, and you just go in there to these game centers and you just do whatever you want. It's just, and they're open 24/7. They're nonstop. And you'll go in there, you go downstairs, you'll see guys over there smoking cigarettes, just over there playing Tekken. And I'd go over, I'd play him, he would whoop my butt, and I'd go over to the side, I'd be like, oh, nice game. Wouldn't even acknowledge me. Yeah. I said, I'm just I'm a CPU to you. Oh, I'm a person. You just whoop my ass. I'm I'll try to tell you that you whooped my butt, and this person won't even look. It's just ridiculous. But it's well integrated into society. But also, the other side of that is that it's a business to crank out these games. So Zangyo is what is defined as overwork in Japan, and unfortunately, there's a lot of that happens over in Japan, of people working a lot of hours. And it's exacerbated if you work in the video game industry, because the video game industry is just as much as any other common industry. It's working in working at a McDonald's, working at a gas station or something like that. It's just a utilitarian thing that you do there. And so these games are being cranked out on a schedule. And you do it for the love of the game, but it is a lot more regimented. I mean, every Thursday we'd be there from 8 a.m. to 3 a.m., which was ridiculous, you know. And I was like, there's no way I want to work this way for the rest of my life. It's ridiculous, but no one would bat an eye. And so it's a lot more, you know, like what you recall the you know, the cases over in EA, the quality of life stories and all those things.
Yep.
Like those have been happening in Japan like 20 years before, and no one would not. I won't even say dare. Dare is not the right word, but the culture value. No one would even think to write an article like that. No one even think to be like, oh, well, you know, this is how it is. And that's what I mean when I say that it just permeates every aspect. It's very games are very normal over in Japan, to the fact where it's like, okay, you're going to work. You want to work in the video game industry? Tons of jobs available for you. Get ready to put your head down and just go to work. But also, as soon as you leave, when you go somewhere, it's going to be a gamified experience, and there are games everywhere. I went, and this is the last thing I'll say. I went to like a retro gaming store in Japan, and it was just filled with, you know, from floor to ceiling of all the old games that were made during the bubble economy, all the cartridges. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, like there's so many games that exist in the world, of course, that are being made now, but then, and they were just, you know, they were flowers in a wasteland. They were just sitting here, but you know, this guy had the store. There's no way he's ever going to close it. But it was just games everywhere, old games, anything that could have been made was just there. And it was just like, yeah, you just don't find retro stores like that. I mean, you do like over in New York, but like this was just everywhere. You know, I went in, I asked him, I was like, do you have the Mike Tyson video game? Because like there was a Mike Tyson game. He's like, oh yeah, like we got like 2 copies of those. And he like just went and pulled them out and had them. And I have one. I bought it. Because I wanted it. Like, but it was a novelty piece, you know? Yeah. And that's what it is filled with that. So again, permeates all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You probably can't visually see that these days with everything being like digital downloads with a lot of titles. But yeah, that must have been a crazy experience, just seeing in a physical space all these retro games from back when an industry had just started, and you know how it's grown and how it's become now. You probably didn't realize that it was such a big industry back then.
Right.
Well. That's really cool.
Which makes you look yourself in the mirror a bit, being like, wow, like, you know, I hate this, like, you know, for every good game, there's like it's not even to say that, it's not even qualitative. It's like for every hit game, there's so many games that weren't hits.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, you know, it made me think, like, what am I in this for? Am I in it for the love of the game? Am I in it for trying to make a lot of money out of it? It really made me think about, you know, what was my experience to be in the gaming world. It was really interesting.
Wow.
And then whole other conversation, which, you know, we probably don't have time to talk about, is cultural values and how they exist in games. I said this in so many talks before that it's kind of played out now, but, you know, popular game titles reflect a cultural value. Famous games over in America are Call of Duty, because we are more individualistic, and that's a cultural value that we over here have in America. And it's makes those kind of games popular because they're war simulators, but they're also first-person shooters. Those games don't sell well in Japan. Instead, you have something called a Shudan-shugi, which I forgot in English, is community oriented, and therefore the games that reflect that are the RPGs, JRPGs, where it's all of us against a common enemy. And those are the games that are popular there, and you see those reverberated within society itself. Like in Japan, people are very orderly. People are very, you know, it's not about the one person, it's about all of us together. And it was really crazy to see that being reflected in society and business, and then therefore in games. And it's the same thing over in America. So I think that was a really cool thing to see exist. And I wrote a paper about it. It's on that Medium page if anyone's interested. But yeah, I thought that was really cool to be able to dive into that and really see it firsthand.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate you saying that. Culture values, it's definitely something people should just take a few minutes to just think about how the area that you're living in or the upbringing you've had, how that's affected the kind of games that you want to design or the kind of games that you're attracted to. That is a really good point. I wish we had more time to kind of go into that, but like you said, you wrote a paper about it on Medium, so I'll definitely link that below for people that want to read more about it. But thank you so much for your time and
No,
sharing
thank you, man. Thank
sharing
you.
your thoughts, your passions. I mean, we jumped around every topic that we spoke about today is something that's very kind of just being molded in my brain. Nothing's very like set, or I don't feel like I understand a lot of the things that we spoke about today, but it's great fuel for my mentality to like understand where the world is and how the world's kind of growing in the games industry and technology and different cultures. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Sorry, what was that?
No, we'll just play the Tontachi game. It's an amalgamation of all these things we're talking about. I'm really trying to keep them all bottled in there. That's the idea. That's the goal.
I love it. I'm excited for the pre-alpha and to try get my hands on it. So yeah, anyone interested in following on John's journey, you can follow the Twitter Tontachi AR. You can go to his website urbanelectronicgames.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Johnny Okami _. Is there any other place that you'd like to direct people where they can find out more about you?
No, you got it. That, everyone can probably find me if they're going to try to find me, but I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this. And it was really relaxing and refreshing to be able to talk about this from a purely game standpoint with somebody who is doing the right work to talk about our story. So thanks again.
No worries. And all the best with all the other blockchain NFT podcasts that you're going to be on, where you probably won't go into too much detail about games, but you'll be talking about some interesting topics that I think you'll bring a good perspective to. So thank you for representing the games industry in those blockchain communities. So
exactly. That's the point. I'm definitely game developer first.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, yeah, all the best on your journey, and keep in touch. All the best with Tontachi.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Zero to Play.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I hope you learned something about game development, the games industry as a whole, or the future of games. You can follow us on Twitter at Zero to Play, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, or any other podcasting service. Other than that, you can find links to this episode down in the description below, and I'll see you guys next week for the next episode.